cyklu Co robią geografowie naszym gościem jest Tim Schuring. Tim mieszka w Holandii, jest nauczycielem geografii, ale też nauczycielem nauczycieli geografii. Uczy na Uniwersytecie Nauk Stosowanych w Utrechcie, jak lepiej uczyć geografii. I trochę o tym z Timem dzisiaj porozmawiamy. Hi Tim, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Adam, for this good introduction. I loved it.
Yeah, it was in Polish actually explaining that you are not only a geography teacher but also you are teaching geography teachers how to teach geography, and that sounds really interesting and fascinating job. So actually, I wanted to start with your own history. Becoming a geographer. How did this passion start in your life?
Ooh, that's an interesting question to go back to that source. I think part of it, I think the seed is in the fact that I'm from a little farm in a rural area. So I used to be going outside, knowing the fields. And I think at high school, geography was like one of the subjects I really loved, like getting to know places in the world, understanding the world. So I think it's a combination of the place I grew up and the high school experience with my own teachers really engaging me within geography. And if you're good at a subject, I think you're getting to like it more and more.
You get some positive feedback and then
Yeah.
you try to learn even more. But why quaternary geology? Because I know that it was your major. Why this part of earth sciences interested you the most?
Um, I think I started my bachelor with like the broad earth sciences here in the Netherlands. So we don't have like physical geography or geology. You combine both within the study. As I already knew that I wanted to become a teacher, so I didn't take any course on mathematics or programming, or I tried to skip all those courses within earth sciences. I did all the courses on explaining geology or explaining how mountains are formed, explaining volcanism. And then during my master's, I did Earth, Surface, and Water, which translates like physical geography more. And those days, I was kind of really interested by the object-based image analysis. So there was also like satellite. There was like a upcoming way of doing research within using satellite images to do classified geomorphology. So if I hadn't become a teacher, then for sure I would be in like satellite image analysis combined with the geography. And I think from the Dutch perspective, if you really want to make sense of the landscape here, it's almost all quaternary geology, which is on the surface here and the subsurface. So only in Limburg and like the eastern areas, we got some hard rock, and of course in the Caribbean Netherlands, but we got some hard rock geology over here. So I think for me it was because I really liked to understand more about the Dutch subsurface, and like when I'm going with the train back to my parents in the northern part of the Netherlands, I'm seeing the landscape now as a geographer, and it's almost that you can put me anywhere in the Netherlands, and I will say we will find here this and this and this in the subsurface.
So you could be a really good guide with all this knowledge. But actually, now you are a teacher, and you need to answer yourself and also your students, which is probably even more challenging. What is geography about? So, how do you answer that question? Why should we bother with geographic knowledge now?
Yeah, that's interesting. You could always say everything you see around you is like geography, or you can make like geography of it. But the interesting part is that I think within, especially the last 2 years, students are more and more seeing the power of geography because they are seeing the world is changing, and to understand that world, that you really need geography. So I think for me as a teacher, to making sense of the power of geography for students is to show them the the geography of their everyday life. So you cannot live like one day without geography, because geography is influencing you in so many ways. And I'm always trying to get to the everyday experiences of my students. So when I'm teaching on ores and mining, I will start like, what's all in your phone from rare earth minerals, and where do they come from, and sure you use them. Or when they wearing clothes, that's where are they made, what is the impact on the local environment in that area. So always trying to get those interesting geography stories for them. But that's also like one of the pitfalls of geography. So you could say geography is like nice to know. It's not like a need to know. But I think these days, when having shifting geopolitics, is getting more and more clear for students as well, that there's also a need to know for geography.
So you think that political events or the war, for example, we have now in Europe, is also a trigger of interest in geography among your students?
Yeah, I think especially young people want to understand, of course, themselves because they're growing up, but also understand their where they live and what's happening. So I think from one perspective, that's getting the general public more and more towards geography. But it's also again, it's another pitfall of geography. You don't want to have geography as the subject of problems. Of course, as geographers, we are problem solvers. So we try to analyze spatial problems, geographical problems. But I think within your lessons, it should not be all about only those problems. In the Netherlands, I think in literature it's called gray geography. It's like the geography of problems. But there's also like the green geography, like the beauty of the earth, the beauty of the landscapes, and like understanding those landscape. And I think as a teacher, if you
need to balance the gray with the green
and the gray geography, you will have great geography lessons. And also it's like also a society function, like making people aware of their environment and their impact on it.
Mm-hmm. It seems that you're quite good in balancing because you got a lot of recognition in the Netherlands as an innovative geography teacher. So it seems that your students like your lessons, but also you can help other teachers to do it, let's say, in a more innovative way. But what kind of innovations in teaching geography you practice? I heard about drones, that you are using drones, and then that your students can see the Earth from above. Is it only like the way of using technology to demonstrate something new?
Oh, I think it's not only technology, but it's like I'm always thinking after my lessons, like, what did they learn from geography and how was their geography thinking? Because I think you can have like multiple lessons with a lot of topics on Earth which are not really a geography lesson. So I'm always trying to make like activities in my classroom which make students really think geographically. And it could be either with maps or like using experiments or like using the drones, for example. I think the drones, it's like one of those examples which was like kind of hobby of me, like making drone videos, using them in the classroom just to show, I think, as another way of representation of like geographical landforms or like parts of a river system in the Netherlands. And the interesting thing is you can really zoom in and zoom out within the drone video. So and that was like one of the things I tried first, and then it developed, and then nowadays I'm using it during field work. So when we're on the beach for like a coastal practicum with students, I can just put on the drone up, and then students see the whole system where they're standing in. So geography is also about patterns and recognizing patterns and where am I. So it's kind of helping within localization within fieldwork. And during COVID, we had like the very challenge to make like geology fieldwork during COVID. Like you could not go to the places, and then
So how can you do the field work without
yeah.
being in the field? Is it actually possible?
So we do a fieldwork trip with the students of the Hogeschool of the University of Applied Sciences on Sicily, and it's really on like geological reasoning and geological thinking, which always starts with like making a drawing of like an outcrop and zooming in the layers and seeing the structure and understanding the rocks. So I made up based on field pictures I took. I made a whole description of the rocks, like not stating what kind of rocks it is, but only descriptives of each rock. Um, but then I found out when students were doing it and we're having like feedback meetings with Zoom like this, that there was like one thing students were missing. It was like the feeling for size of the outcrop and even using Google Earth images, it was not really getting them. And then I thought again about those drones, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, of course. And since then, every time I'm in a geology outcrop, I'm starting with a drone on like a grain size level. You see really the crystals almost of the rock, and then zooming out and seeing the whole outcrop. And I think that's also where geography and geology is about. It's like about those different processes on different scales, and so that was like one of those things which developed within my teaching. But I'm always
So it
trying
seems
to.
that the drone technology somehow changes the way you can show the Earth, but also you use GIS programs or GIS data that are organized in the layers. Uh, to what extent this technology changes the way we are teaching geography, we are understanding geography?
Well, I think with technology, it's always about making again the balance between do I really need this new technology or is it like a replacement with the geography? Because I think um, although you introduced me as an innovative teacher, I'm also really into like making the old-fashioned maps with color pencils and you could always for vertical relations within like one area you could use the overlays and seeing patterns even without a GIS. So I think it's important to see GIS not as a goal as it itself, but always as a tool to get them into geographical thinking. So when in high school, then it's always starting with like general cartography and learning how to make maps, and then always only after that I'm making the step to like using a GIS because students really need to get into the program to know every button and how it works, and it's quite an investment to do that. So then I really want to make sure that they already know the cartography, but there are also teachers doing it the other way around. They're saying, "Oh, we need that's interesting program to get like the students involved and showing them the 21st century geography mapping skills with GIS." So for me, it's starting with like old-fashioned cartography. I think it's also really important to learn how to map and to map the world around you. But yeah, I think GIS is really making new things possible for students, like seeing those relations themselves. It's like I think for me, it's changing to I'm not telling them the relations, but they are as a geography discovering those relationships. And I think GIS is a really good tool for that.
So we know that technology is developing, but to what extent the expectations of your students and of students in general are changing? Do you observe that the students change in a way that they expect something different from geography lessons?
I think from I could go with multiple angles on that question. I think topic wise, I think a lot of students are worried about climate change, worried about geopolitical changes in the world nowadays. So it's really quite recent. So there's a part of students which are really engaging on those topics. And again, it's interesting from didactic pedagogy perspective, like how do you teach those subjects? Like is it a problem, or do we? I'm always trying to show them there are multiple futures path possible, and it's not like we're fixed in a doom scenario, or trying to get them into what could you do within this problem, and do you think this solution is a good solution for you, for yourself, but also for like the people who are living in other areas? So making that decision making kind within teaching those subjects. And I think from pedagogy, it's more and more changing in students which are. I think nowadays they got, and maybe the students watching this video can confirm that, but it's like nowadays it's, when I was studying, it was really about reading the book from like beginning to end, and there was like studying. But I see a change within students, like they're really fast in using AI and like searching for like how does this work, and then just showing
and getting the quick answer.
Yeah, they're changing into like they're really keen for a quick answer. And it changed my own way of teaching, especially on like the teaching institute. Like nowadays I'm giving more geological puzzles, for example. I'm just giving them 4 rocks, a map, and giving them the challenge to tell them like what happened in this area. What could you tell me based on those sources? And I'm sometimes giving them key terms, like have a look on this, for example, instead of just telling them the story. I think that's part of changing within students, but also changing within me as a teacher. I think when you're a starting teacher, you're working on your own story. You want to have your own story, and I think most of the control you have when you're just telling your story. It's not like less interaction with students. And nowadays,
then you learn how to adjust.
Yes, and nowadays I'm like the goal of my lesson is that the students get the story, and they are making the story of the lesson. It's not about me making the story, but it's like when you're an actor and having a new script. The first times you will go really strict on your lines, and then when you know the story more and more, you're getting more and more open for other ways of teaching. And I think it's one of the realizations that it's not about like me telling a story, which is also kind of my teaching. I think like, for example, I really love to tell the students the story about Alexander von Humboldt when he's climbing Chimborazo, and for the first time he's seeing, because he's really almost on top then, he's seeing the vegetation patterns, because nowadays we know those vegetation patterns from Google Earth and but he was just like, as a German geographer, he was like, he's seen the patterns from Germany to Norway within vegetation, and now he saw like the same patterns with hive.
And we can say that it was a discovery.
Yeah, he's the story is really good. Like you see him climbing the mountain and seeing the geography, and then, for example, so that's like one of those things I'm really doing some kind of storytelling with my students. I just get the book and tell them the story, which is also part of great teaching. I think as a teacher you should have those great stories, but the other way is like getting those students into like making those discoveries themselves, and then it's their own geography.
So speaking of handbooks and stories, you have also some insights on how geography is taught, and actually how geography handbooks look like in different countries. you're working in a IGEO working group that is somehow comparing geography curricula in high schools across different countries. And what are the insights from that interesting comparison? Do you see any patterns on how geography is actually displayed presented in handbooks, in school handbooks?
Yeah, I think there's actually a whole geography about geography curricula. So, for example, if you get like mathematics or physics, when you compare countries, it's more the same. Maybe like one subtopic is it's taught a little bit less, but I think for geography there's a really broad range within curricula around the world. So I was participating in 2008 as a participant for IGEO, and then nowadays I'm within the steering committee, and I was test convener for like 6 years for the multimedia test, like one of those tests the students are making during that World Championships in geography.
Asking the most difficult geography questions in the world.
Yeah, but it's really interesting that because at first I was thinking like because I was as a test convener, I'm setting up the questions, and I was quite sure like, oh, it should be like these questions, and then I had a committee of like 6 geography teacher trainers over the world, like one from Thailand and Australia, and getting feedback all over the world, and it was really like, oh, this is not about geography. This is not what geography is about. How could you ask this kind of questions? And it's also interestingly about the projections. So the first time I made a test, I was just using European world map projections. And then the feedback
was turned out that like, it's not the only one.
No, so the feedback was also like, could you use other projections? Like, this is not how we used to here in Australia. And but coming back to your question, it's about the geography of those curricula. It's a really broad spectrum from countries in which it's almost like social science. For example, within Brazil, there's like almost no geology or like physical geography within the geography curriculum. It's mostly based on history. It's a kind of history geography combination, and has also, I think, a kind of nation building function within the curriculum, you could say. Within Europe, there are also major differences. When you look in like England, it's more about coast and rivers because they have like a lot of coast and rivers, of course. Within the Netherlands, we've got a curriculum with an accent on like water management, rivers and coastal management, because we're a low-lying country. In Belgium, for example, has more geology. So within the curriculum, there's also more geology. So the curriculum is always representing geographical highlights of the country. But even then, there's like, I think it was Denmark in which students have like a course on geography, but there's also a course on geosciences they could follow. So there's really earth sciences within secondary school.
So it's somehow separate.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's depending on the track you choose, as I understand, but it's like they got geosciences with more on focus on geography and a little bit of physical geography, but there's also a whole part of geosciences with more on like environmental climatology and geology within that course.
But what we also observe is also that the curricula are changing, are constantly modified, and sometimes governments insist on cuts or expansion of particular curricula in high schools. So is there any pattern of changes as well? That some topics are, let's say, stressed more nowadays than it used to be some time ago?
I think geography has also a history of geography teaching, and there was like a long phase in which it was all about knowing place names, and like factual geography,
like encyclopedia.
Then it was changing to more like skills-based curricula, and you could argue where's the geography within a skill-based curricula. If it's only about skills, it's also about knowledge you should apply within those skills. And nowadays we're turning into like a powerful geography curricula within like having knowledge and skills meaningful coming together. But you also see those difference still. I think when you have like the Dutch or German curricula, it's more about those problem solving exercises and thinking within scenarios about the future. But when I'm looking at, for example, regional, because there's like a Baltic Olympiad, but also like a Balkan Olympiad. And when you're looking at those questions, it's really about name the 5 countries which are exporting at the most iron ore, for example. And then
So
I'm
it's
thinking
still
like
fact based.
it's really fact based still in some countries, and so it's interesting to think about what should geography be about and what do we teach within secondary school as geographers. What information and skills and knowledge do we want to give students to get grasp on the.
But what's your personal take on that? I mean, where it should head in the future? What is the most attractive perspective towards which geographic education should expand and should be more open?
Well, I think I'm again like the balanced person. Like it's for me it's also important for students that they actually know things and they know about landscapes, how they form, and because you need geographical words to express yourself when thinking geographically. So, for example, when you have like the Köppen system on climates, yeah, I really want to tell my students like how does that classification work, and that they can make up those codes within the climate graph for themselves. You should also argue that's like old knowledge, but it's also about knowledge, like how do you classify things within geography. It's about knowledge, about the knowledge, like how do we know how that classification came up, and then but then also making the step towards like climate change and how our landscape's changing by climate change and how is the climate actually changing, and so I think for me the curricula should be like the balance between the green and the gray geography, like the problems and the beauty of geography coming together, and in a society with like fast knowledge and like fake news, and I think to make sense of things happening within society, I think you have to have knowledge yourself to value fake news, fake maps, to be critical, because I think governments and schools want to have like critical side people want to have students to become like critical, but for critical thinking I think you have to have knowledge and within the discussion about knowledge against like if it's like 2 worlds, skills, I think it should be about both, and I think I don't know if it's like in other countries as well, but I think within the Netherlands, if you see the curriculum discussion, it's also a pendula, I think, going back and forth, but nowadays it's really about they call it basic skills like mathematics and reading and Dutch language, and there's a really focus on that part, but I think there's a lot of language within geography, so you cannot just like doing reading or reading skills without knowledge, so you also need those subjects as biology, geography.
So again, it's about a balance, and it's also the conclusion might be that geography is still offering something very valuable in the curriculum. So the relevance of geographic knowledge, the embeddedness in the in the surrounding region is something very unique that geography offers. Tim, I'm very grateful that you found time to talk to us, to be our guest here in this cycle. What do geographers do? You're a really interesting example of a career of geographer who now also teaches geography and also teaches teachers of geography. Thanks for accepting our invitation, and thank you very much for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And for all those who are watching and are really into geography, I really want to say, just think about what you could do with that knowledge, like not only becoming a hydrologist or like a geologist, but also think about teaching and I will make sure that you get like the energy of getting people watching their own environment in a different way. I think that's really one of the major attractive things of becoming a teacher. So be critical on what you're doing with your knowledge, and maybe consider a future as a teacher yourself.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.